This is Mif, your life and performance coach, and welcome to the Actually You Can podcast. On this show, we discuss strategies for growth for ambitious individuals so you can spark and initiate your next evolution. You'll hear from inspiring guests who will share their journeys, challenges, and lessons learned. And I'll be sharing insights and actionable takeaways from my aligned results framework that will help you to align your goals, mindset, and strategies to reach your highest potential. Be sure to hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to so you can easily find this podcast again and stay updated with new episodes dropping every week. Today, we're talking about navigating life transitions with Bryan Yates, a performance and personal development coach. With a unique background as a historian, as a producer, as a fitness coach, and a cycling coach, Bryan helps his clients successfully pivot in their careers and personal lives. So whether you're contemplating a career shift, a new personal challenge, or simply curious about the art of embracing change, you're in for a treat. Let's get started. Thanks for jumping on the show today, Bryan. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Miff, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be in Australia with you and wherever else we are.
And today we're going to talk about the subject of transitions, and you're very experienced in this. And so to give a bit of context to where we're going today, I'd love for you to share a bit about what you do in your business today currently.
Yeah, what I do, I am a performance and personal development coach for midlife creative business professionals and business owners. So, um, a short way of saying it depends on whom you ask. If you ask me, I help midlife business owners who are feeling stale and stuck in whether it is life or business to work to whatever that next goal is. If you asked my wife, she'd say in very colorful, salty language, he helps people unscrew themselves. So I think you take it however you want, but definitely I'm a bit of a transition expert. So there you go.
I love that framing of it. I never understood it like that, but I feel like I'm doing that a lot to myself most of the time. So no, I really appreciate that. And you
I
mentioned
just throw a label.
No, I love it. And that's very different to one of the careers that you've had previously as a historian. I'd love to talk about your time there. So, what was your role? What did you do? And what did that career look like?
Dear God, you are reaching into the wayback machine. Yeah, so I started my career a long time ago. I thought I was going to be an academic historian and had studied to do that. I have a master's in European history and moved to Los Angeles to be with my then girlfriend, now wife, and was going to take a gap year. As we just talked off air about a gap year, and I was going to take a gap year before I went and finished a PhD. And at any rate, let's just power ahead. I happened to luck out and find a job working for Steven Spielberg a year or so out of graduate school. He had started a foundation called the Survivors of the Shoah Visual History Foundation. And we had this was in the mid 90s, and we had a mandate to collect 100,000 hours of digital Holocaust survivor testimony, which amounted to about 50,000 plus survivors. And so this was the kind of pre-commercial internet. And so we were developing a whole technology around cataloging, digitizing and cataloging these testimonies. And so I worked as an historian, producer kind of guy for the Shoah Foundation for about 3 or 4 years. But bringing my historian chops to that, and then back then applying it to this kind of this emerging internet technology.
That's incredible. And there's definitely been some transitions that have happened from that particular journey to where you are now. What was that next transition, and how did you go about making that transition? What was going through your mind? Tell us more about that.
First of all, I have to say I appreciate how on point you are and how you're following the through line so well. Um, Yeah, I went from kind of the sublime to the ridiculous in some way. So what we were doing at the Shoah Foundation was a lot of digital work, and many of us at the time, this was pre-Google, so search engines were coming up, and a lot of us were getting poached by search engines to do that kind of work, that to make things searchable. So the stuff that we take for granted now, and particularly even more so with Chat GPT, it's like we were on the human side, kind of figuring out if someone's watching this Holocaust survivor testimony, what are the key things that they're going to want to find? What will they search for? I didn't want to go that route. I actually wanted to make educational content, like educational games and things like that. So I ended up getting hired by the Walt Disney Company to help build its internet division going and off the ground. And I had never really wanted to work for Disney, but I had a friend who said, "Oh, just come. It'll take it. It'll be like a well paid graduate fellowship." And I ended up working there and kind of just failing my way upwards there for about 7 years, working within the Walt Disney Company and getting increasing responsibilities, and then leaving and starting for a while a digital media agency that was continued to work for Disney, but also did work for other entertainment companies and other Fortune 100 companies. So it was not exactly the transition that I expected. It was not, it's certainly not the one that I might have, like Hollywood one that I would have written. It was a great one. I mean, I learned a lot, and I learned also kind of what my thresholds were personally and professionally, like what I wanted for myself and didn't want for myself. But I was a kid in my 20s and early 30s. Like, what did I know? I was kind of making it up all the way. In some ways, I'd sort of caught the tiger by the tail, and it was like, okay, here we go. We'll see what happens. And believing that it had to be one thing and getting wrapped up in one kind of mindset that we do at that age, and then working my way through that, which I don't think I really actually fully worked through until my late 40s and early 50s. But there you go.
And you mentioned that role wasn't what you were expecting. What were you expecting at the time?
I thought being a producer was going to be way more glamorous. I thought it was going to be, I mean, you probably get this all the time from producing your podcast. I figured, oh, this is going to be so glamorous. Let the accolades come in. Here they come. And really, it was a lot of time in Excel spreadsheets. And it was a lot of time having to make a lot of compromises. Like, there's the thing that you want to make, and then there's the thing that you compromise to make, right? And I've been hearing this quote over and over in my head. Maybe it's a Tony Robbins quote. I don't know. How we start is not how we finish, is not how we end up. And it was certainly kind of that situation for me. And listen, like I said, I had a lot of great responsibilities at the Disney company. And I think towards the end, I kind of got the thing that I had asked for, but then I realized after doing it, it's like, be careful what you're asking for, because it turned out to be not what I really wanted to handle. So there you go. That
Yeah, and I think that's probably an experience a lot of people in their 20s can resonate with. That's where you're really starting to go, what do I want to do with my life? And you think you want something, then you're in it and you're like, this isn't what I thought it was, or this isn't what I actually want. And so, where did that journey take you from there?
Well, I mean, I think I was really crashing and burning also at the last part of my Disney experience, right? I had was developing a pretty cool project for preschoolers, and but I was exhausted, like working in Los Angeles. But we had a partner company in Boston that we were developing it with, which meant as the senior producer, I basically uprooted my life and was living across the country 2 weeks out of the month, 3 weeks out of the month, coming home, barely seeing my wife, and the project just didn't land quite the way that we wanted it to. Um, so I left Disney completely burned out, and really at the time, the mantra there was, "Don't bother coming in Sunday if you weren't here on Saturday."
Oof.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was challenging. So I didn't really know what to do, and I just said, I'm done. I'm done. Um, I think what I did that year I was leaving Disney, I decided I wanted to go and get big wave surfing lessons in Hawaii. I figured, oh, that'll be fun. That'll be an interesting way. Not really realizing that I was already living on the metaphorical wave. So left Disney, was consulting for a little while, and then partnered with another former Disney producer for a small agency. Here I think to bring it to your theme on transitions is that when I made that transition from going from Disney to kind of consulting to doing this thing with another Disney producer is that I hadn't processed I hadn't processed any of it. I hadn't processed any of that Disney experience. I hadn't looked at what my motives and intentions were. I hadn't really looked beyond the achievement culture part of it, and I hadn't dug deep. And so the decisions I was making as I look back were pretty fear based, right? They were, oh, I'm going to get into this partnership with this other person. As I look at it now, I'll say also I'm a recovering alcoholic. So I've done a lot of work around thinking about this stuff and looking it through. I think when I got into that partnership, there was a lot of fear that was masked by bravado. And the fear in many ways was A, I didn't believe I could do it myself. So I got someone else and I got the wrong relationship. And, I own my part of that. It gave them the wrong relationship too. And I think that that really hobbled our ability to work together in addition to what was going on externally in the economy. So, I got into that agency and we did it for 4 years or so and had some successes, but also I think we just really struggled in a lot of ways because, at least for me, I hadn't really looked at what those real motivations and motives and intentions were that were driving the decisions. And so there you go. If I'm not looking at that stuff, if I'm not processing it, and you think that I might have known that as a historian, as particularly someone who had worked with, who was working with Holocaust survivors, would have known you got to go through these things. You got to go through these stories and unpack. I didn't even see the stories I was telling myself. So,
Yeah.
in the context of what you're talking about in transitions, is like look at the stories you're telling yourself, not just at a surface level, but like what are the stories under the stories under the stories.
And so, if you don't mind me asking, at what point did alcohol come into the picture? Was it during this time, or did that come in as I guess, a support to you later on in your journey?
Now, I was born an alcoholic, but I started, I mean, my alcoholism started when I was about 14 and a half and 15. So I was trying to, I mean, carried it through college, and at times it was worse, at times it was better. And by better, it just meant less rampant. Definitely rampant when I was living in Boston. As I look back, in some ways, I was using a lot of that time away to do a lot of heavy drinking, and that was fueling my exhaustion. And I think carried through in this business. And I got out. It's funny, when I got out of that digital media agency, I got into another business, but I hadn't looked at the fears that came up from Disney and the other one. And so alcohol was in all of that. And at the same
Yeah.
time, being kind of hard driving on achievement culture, coming back to bike racing in my mid 30s, late 30s, or at least bike enthusiasm and then some racing, and trying to do all of these things, trying to run businesses, trying to relearn how to race bikes, trying to whatever survive financially, all the stuff, right? It's all the stuff at once.
And just by the little that I've known of you so far, you can tell that those decisions that you're making now aren't rooted by fear. You have this really, I feel it's a genuine confidence and assuredness in who you are today. How did you? Well, would you agree?
Yeah, I would say I'm a lot more confident today. That doesn't mean that I'm not struck by fear. And I will give you a very clear example of that I deal with today. Uh, we left Los Angeles a few years ago, moved to the where I live now, and it happens to be, in my estimation, one of the most beautiful places to ride a bike in the world, both for gravel cycling and road cycling. So I imagine you have a lot of cyclists who listen to your podcast, given your history. And just to give you an example, I can go out for 5 hours and see 15 cars. So
Oh,
Yeah, it's pure escapism. So we started a bike race, a gravel race here last year. It was our first year, and did pretty well in the first year. Pretty like it had a pretty strong start, and we're 5 weeks out, and we're from the version two of this. And I just had this conversation with someone earlier today. It's like it doesn't stop me from we don't have the numbers that I had hoped for. We didn't have the numbers that I were building expectations around. And if you'll see me, I'm putting air quotes around expectations because this is a trap for all of us. And so with that comes all of the holy crap. Am I going to lose my shirt? Am I going to starve? Am I going to make my family destitute? None of it's true, right? I'm playing out future fears for no reason. Like we have a great production team, we have a great brand. We may not get the numbers that we had expected, but we have great sponsors, and it's going to be exactly how it's supposed to be the day we get there. And as long as we keep people safe and smiling, and I give out hugs, and the timing is done well, and the food is at the end, we've had a great event. So it happens, but I also have my confidence, I suppose, to answer your question, is that I have a better toolkit to process it. Fears don't go away. We just learn how to dance with them better, right? We don't have to grit our way through them. We don't have to muscle them. We don't have to carry them like extra weight. We just got to say, oh, yeah, there you are. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and that's something I talk about with guests a lot, especially when it comes to what we typically call negative emotions like fear, anger, or sadness. It's not that we want to rid them from our lives completely because they are also what gives our lives a bit of color. I always say to my clients when they're feeling anxious, I'm like, good. It means you give a shit about what you're about to do. If you didn't feel
Exactly.
anything, then I'd be like, okay, there's
Yeah,
something
we can.
here. And so I'm interested to hear then, you mentioned that you built up your toolbox. At
Mhm.
what stage did you start becoming more aware of those decisions that you were making rooted in fear, I guess, and how did you start to manage that and make more supportive decisions for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the first time I got sober was about 12 years ago and had about 8 or 9 years of sobriety. And I didn't really work any program other than kind of white knuckling my sobriety process. So I was white knuckling the not drinking, but I wasn't doing all of the other work that one has to do around that. And I slipped in my sobriety about 3 years ago, actually, coming up on my anniversary. And at that point, I said, okay, I have clearly not been doing this right. I've clearly been batshit crazy in many ways and not really known that I was batshit crazy. And I sat down and started doing with the work that has to get done. And I've done it. I did the work with people who knew how to do the work, started getting therapy for myself in addition to substance recovery, and then just started and I think the most critical thing is that I learned how to say the second three most powerful words in any language, which is I need help. And I think a lot of people, like it took me probably up to the age of 49, 50 to really authentically say I need help, not just like I got this, I am fine, none of that. It was like, yeah, I need help.
Yeah. And what made you say that I need help? Was it a particular event or you just like, I'm done, like things need to be different? What sparked you to say those words?
Yeah, I was lying, I was hiding, I was obfuscating, I was doing things that I was not proud of. And I knew it. I knew it. I just was in a state of my compulsive behavior, right? I couldn't stop the whole the ongoing craving, right? Once the craving starts for me, it just goes. It kicks in. It really can come from a lot of things too, right? People, places, things, substances. I can get into that kind of, and I had no idea that that was even a thing. Right? It's like, oh, this is how everybody lives. This is how we live. Great. I just happen to know that mine also included a ways to medicate, but also, people get addicted to people. People get addicted to relationships. People get addicted to social media, whatever it is. And so it was
Yeah.
that, and then having someone in my life just go, "You done yet? Are you done yet? Are you
Yeah.
done feeling miserable? Are you ready to try something different? Because this thing you're doing ain't working for you or anybody else."
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. It's so wonderful to hear that you had such incredible support too. And it's always hard seeing people that you love go through these sorts of pain. You're like, everyone's on their own journey. And to your point, it's like, are you done yet? I can't tell you when you're done. You need to decide that you're done to be able to make that change. And so what's your journey look like since that moment? You mentioned you've done the work. What sort of work have you been doing?
I've done 12-step work around that, which is not all. I mean, it's not just like finishing a century ride or finishing a marathon. It's an ongoing process, right? I mean, point to point within it, it can be the century ride, but I think that it's this ongoing process and it's developing a series of tools along the way. And it's unpacking, it's like surrendering, accepting our powerlessness. I mean, what I try to control anymore and what I imagine I try to control anymore is very small. I keep a very small hoop around me. And I think a lot of people can take that for apathy, but I actually find it it's not. I take it for empowerment. It's like, oh, yeah, that's my
Mm.
space. That's what I can do really well within my space. And every time I feel like making the hula hoop bigger, my ego says, make the hula hoop around me bigger. It's like, no, make it smaller, work with less, work with less. And I'm actually, it reminds me of a few years back. I took a group of cyclists that I was working with to ride around the North Island of New Zealand with a buddy of mine who runs a magazine there. And we were packing up the car to go, and I'm a terrible packer of things. And my buddy looked at me and goes, "Brosy, pack light, travel far." And I was like, oh. So now
Mm.
for me, it's like, how light can I pack? How
I
light can
love
I
that
pack?
quote.
So that acceptance, and then I think just accepting powerlessness and not trying to assume that I can do it all. And I think I can't overstate this, but that ability, training the muscle to say I need help, is so important. And I think we live in such a DIY culture where we'll say, "Oh, we'll do whatever we can to not ask for help. We'll do whatever we can. I'll go look it up on YouTube. I'll find an app. I'll buy the 10 latest self-help books, and I'll do all these things so that I never have to actually say the words that I really am actually dying to say."
That's a really good point too, and I think there's a lot of messaging out there. I don't know, especially speaking as a female, it's like, yes, be a strong, independent female. It doesn't mean that you can't ask for help. It doesn't mean by
Nope.
asking for help you're also weak. I think it's
Oh,
actually really fucking smart. Especially if you're learning a new skill, asking someone who's achieved the results that you're hoping to achieve for yourself is really smart.
yeah. They're not incompatible, people.
Yeah.
You can do both. You can be strong and ask for help. In fact, I think
Yeah.
that being able to make the bold statement to confidently say, "Hey, can you help me? Can you show me how to do this?
I
Can
love
you
that.
show me how to?" I think
And
women tend to be, in my experience from having coached a lot of cyclists, because in this journey, I had a
mm,
coaching business as a cycling coaching business before it's turned into this thing. And it's way more fun for me and actually phenomenally easier to coach women on the bike because they
oh,
come out like, "I don't want to crash and I want to learn. And I want to know that I want to be able to get out there and do this safely." I'm like, "Oh, God, you're so easy to work with." The fast stuff comes later, and that's fine. We can do it, but it's always the dudes who come in. "Well, I gotta beat that guy, and I gotta do this." I was like, "Turn off your agenda."
it's interesting you say that because I work in a gym as well. And in most small group fitness gyms, I feel like the majority of the population there are females because they are seeking that coach support. The men that I speak to, it's often like, oh, I don't need to go to a group gym. If they do, it's for community, but otherwise it's, I'll just teach myself from YouTube or I'll trial and learn and I'll just figure it out myself. It's interesting you say that. And you mentioned that you coach cycling. where we took off with your career is you're finishing up with Disney and your consulting. How did you get into cycling?
Yeah, the 2000, I don't know how old you are, but the 2008 banking crisis really kind of crushed that digital media agency. We were actually too small to survive. Like you knew, and there's a whole other series of factors we can talk about. Plus, I was like, why am I making kids and family entertainment? I don't have kids. I'm not going to have kids. Why am
Yeah.
I doing this? I'm still trying to do this thing and get recognized for this thing, but I'm making things for people for a segment, an audience segment that I have no business making it for. It's like
Mm.
I have no relationship to it. So why am I doing it? So broke up and I said, you know what? I want to do wellness. I want to do health and fitness. So that's where I want to do. I'm getting back into bike racing, want to do that. Partnered with some indoor cycling studios in the Los Angeles area, got into that as a partner and started developing that. Ran some studios in the Los Angeles area. So I figured, well, uh, I should know more about what I'm doing. Picked up personal training at the time, which I don't really do a lot of anymore. Picked up a whole lot on nutrition and was still doing a lot of the bike racing, was coaching, working with a lot of, amateur athletes, but on the personal training side was working with executives because coming from Disney, I spoke that language. Also, was tending to work with people who had an athletic mindset. Like my favorite athletes to work with, this might surprise you, were actually, touring drummers, like drummers who went
Yeah,
out for
cool.
30 weeks a year and had to play all these nights. I was like, you are my athletes. You're the ones that I love the most. But was working with a lot of cyclists, so had the cycling background, not just from the indoor cycling, but like, I have all the accreditations from the USA cycling that there was. And so all my coaching today, this transitional coaching, comes from business, comes from history, listening to stories, comes from understanding the body mechanics, and frankly, understanding how to finish it, how to start, finish, and finish an endurance event, and knowing what's going to happen along the way.
And I love speaking to people who have such diverse backgrounds because it's like you look back and maybe at the point in time, the transitions didn't really make sense to some people. And looking back, it's easier to connect the dots. I'm interested to hear from you. What are the common threads between all of those careers? I mean, I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about identity and saying we need to stop identifying with what we do and start identifying ourselves with who we are.
Yeah.
In that sort of framework, who were you during each of those careers, and was there a common thread between that?
No, well, I guess there was. It was very achievement driven, right?
Mm,
And setting very high, impossible standards that I could then use to brutalize myself with
mm,
and then have an excuse to drink or to run through all of those. So I suppose the common thread was an alcoholic. There's that
mm,
element as a common thread. And I think that craving, that ego, that ego craving for coming up with
mm,
achievements. Like I'm a particularly today more than ever, I'm like a mid-pack rider. I mean, there was a period where I was kind of fast, but I'm never a great tactical racer. But
mm,
and yet there was that, there's the vision. We've got an I am that guy. It's like I am that guy. But I think the healthier perspective of all of this now is that, and the common thread is stories. It's
mm,
always been stories. Like I started as a historian and I feel more like a historian today than ever before because the way I work is sit down and we'll just have conversations with the people I'm coaching and we unpack like, all right, what are you saying? What are you really saying? What are you believing? And where's that coming from? Who did that to you? And why do you keep letting it replay out? Right. So I look at everyone in many respects as like a whole new history project for me. So and I don't know, like coming out of graduate school, if I hadn't done the Holocaust survivor work, I'm not
mm.
sure I would have that perspective that I have today. But it's always like stories. Like stories are what change
Yeah,
lives. Stories are what connect us. Stories are what get us at the heart. Like, and it's not at the head level. It's like, oh, I felt that.
yeah, and You brushed over some questions when you were speaking about people's stories. What do you want to do? What patterns are you repeating? But I'm like, they're such powerful questions for people to ask themselves. And so I'm interested to hear if in the transition work that you do with people, if someone's struggling to make their next move. I mean, just off air, we were talking about a friend of mine who's just finished up her career as a professional athlete and she's taking the time to have a gap year and she's mentioning she's really using that time to grieve the process and I guess the closing of that identity and transition into a new one. How would you go about supporting someone in that sort of situation?
It would be a dream. I mean, I think that that would be a whole lot of conversation, right? It's that if I'm thinking like that athlete, there's a certain amount of unwinding. There's a lot of unwinding that has to happen, right? There's that. Oh, I got to get up and train today. I got to get up and train. I still have to get up and train today. And I think the number one question in that is, what are you believing about yourself? What are you believing about the situation? What are you believing about other people? I mean, is that friend maybe still overtraining because they need to look a certain way? And if they need to look a certain way, why is that? Do they need to be seen as a certain way? Like why? Where is that coming from? And I think injecting a lot of pauses, right? A lot of pauses into, that person. I can imagine that person hopping out of bed, getting all kitted up. And it's like, how about you take a little pause first and ask yourself, do I have to do this today? If so, why? Why?
Yeah. Yep.
And then, just learning to become very attentive to the committee that's in their head, and start to have different kinds of conversations with themselves. So I think that is there's a lot of I think there's probably a lot of similar work between substance recovery and similar work between being an injured recovering from being an injured athlete, and I think some
Mhm.
sort of identity recovery as well. I suspect that there's a lot of similar overlap. I don't know exactly what the markers are along the way, but in all of them, I think the common thread is talking with either people who have gone before you or people who have gone and done their own kind of recovery work, and just asking questions of why does it have to be like this, and
Mhm.
learning other ways to use whatever it is that drive is, learning to apply that drive in other ways.
Yeah, and that's something I think I honestly believe that successful athletes can be successful in business and other areas of their life by drawing on the qualities that made them incredible athletes. And a lot of them, similar to yourself, are driven by achievement. One of my highest values is achievement, and it's asking yourself how can you still fulfill that value if it's really important to you in a way that's resourceful. I guess in civilian life, like you're not looking at everything like a competition. You're not trying to be the best and win at everything, but it's going, how can I do things like for me in my work, it became how can I achieve things that were fulfilling? So it sounds like similar to your journey, I was driven by achievement, but I wasn't really paying attention to what I was achieving. I was just told that I could be good at things. So I decided to go be good
I'll
at
be good
them.
at all things.
Yeah. And so, and so it was really transitioning out of the sport for me was going, hang on a moment. What do I actually enjoy? And how can I achieve that?
I think asking why a lot more is
Yeah.
really useful. And I think there's another thing in here as well, and that at some point I I still have it. I mean, I still like want to do well, but I think shifting from the idea of competition to collaboration.
Ooh, I like
And
that.
how can we collaborate more? How can we co-create, right? This is you and I talking is a great example of collaboration and co-creating, right? The whatever comes out of this is going to be greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
And so I think it's, for me, it was how do I find healthy containers for co-creation and collaboration? Like if I think about that digital media agency, we both had come at it from a degree of competition. We'd both come at it from fear needs of like money. Where's the money coming from? We hadn't done enough due diligence. We hadn't had
Mm.
the conversations around money in the way that we should have. And I think in some ways, or we weren't really listening, right? It was like I was like, I know what I need to hear. I'm going to do what I need to hear.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think learning to make that shift. There's you've heard this a million times, I'm sure. The old adage of, you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together.
100%. And I don't think I really understood it. I think because I was always someone who liked to train by themselves, liked to do things by themselves. And I realized because this is in the cycling sense, for me, cycling was also a bit of an escapism. I liked being by myself and being by my thoughts. And I was like, probably should have taken that as a sign that maybe I wasn't doing this for really healthy reasons. But now that you phrase it as a move from competition to collaboration, holy hell, that would have been a different experience if I had that lens during my time there.
Yeah, I think. Well, here's the thing: I'm just not that fast anymore, and and so and so. Boy, I'm so glad I know how to race like a fat guy, which is I don't even do racing,
A lot
and
smarter.
I don't, and no offense to anyone out there, please don't take it that. What I mean is, I will suck wheels all day long because guess what? That makes 50 miles together feel a whole lot more productive than 50 miles by myself, where I've just beat myself up for not being fast anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And so out of interest in the work that you do with transitions, what are some challenges that you find? What are some really common challenges you find people have with that? So another example that's coming to mind is there was a period of time when I was cycling that I had a couple of injuries and stuff going on, and the doctor said, "That's it. From today, you can't ride your bike for 6 weeks." And I was like, well, what am I meant to do? And he's like, I don't know, just go figure it out. You just can't ride your bike for 6 weeks. And needless to say, that didn't end very well. So I'm interested to hear. I mean, some people have a longer time to transition. It's something that they planned. And some people, all of a sudden, it might be an injury and they need to transition within 24 hours. So, what's some transitions you supported people with, and what's some lessons learned that others could draw inspiration from as well?
Mm. Let's talk about the work transition. I think a lot of people are afraid to make transitions, and so they get stuck in so they allow that inertia of their fear to keep them where they are, and yet they know every fiber of their body because they get up feeling resentful, go to sleep feeling resentful, and at the same time tell themselves, "Well, I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to do this." And talk to someone, like, just talk to people, say this is what's going, and don't talk to people who co-sign your bullshit. Like, I don't want to talk to people who say, "Hey bro, I have another Chardonnay, you go." I want someone who's going to call my crap and say, does it really have to be that way? What if? Like, have someone who's going to ask what if. I think recognize that you're in a transition too. I just had so I'm working with a guy who's a neuroscience professor. We actually just did a LinkedIn Live about a month or so ago on transitions. Or did we do it the other day? No, we did resistance the other day. We did transitions about a month ago. And I think about, I've never done a try because running's for fugitives, but I think about that those key points between the swim and the ride and the ride and the run. I think that those transitions are so critical, and you have to be really intentional and really mindful. There you go. You wanted a tool? Be really intentional and be really mindful of where you are. We're really good at connecting to the discomfort and thinking that's the thing. And we're not so good at slowing down and trying to explore the discomfort. We will do whatever we can to rush through the discomfort. Whatever we can, in the same way that we will do whatever we can to not have to actually verbally say, "I need help," we will do whatever we can to turn down the chatter in our head. We'll pick up our phones all the time. We'll text friends. We'll eat compulsively. Whatever it is, we'll do whatever we can to avoid it. And learn to sit with it, learn to become aware of it. I think in a very practical sense, let's take this to that point in a bike ride. it used to be for me on a big century ride or more, mile 70 to 80, mile 65 to 80 was a period of depression and sadness and just resentment and anger.
Yep.
And learning to work through that and say, oh, like I remember the first few times it started coming up, I was like, what is that? That's terrifying. And when's it going away? And learning, like, I think a very practical tool is learning how to breathe differently. Just attend to how you learn how to breathe. There's so much
Mm.
power in that. And, there's the physiological sigh of breathing in, taking another sip and going, and just sighing it out. Like, so you can't meditate. I don't really prescribe meditation for clients anymore because they can't do it. But if we can do like that breathing technique 5 or 6 times or 10 times, it's a game changer for a lot of people. So I think in a practical sense, that is a nice way to start to navigate the discomfort of transitions in a real practical day to day way and dealing with that discomfort. And I think becoming really aware of it. The other thing is stop, break the cycles of living in that willful state of confusion. Like it's totally okay to be confused. It's totally okay to be a little unclear. It's not so great to stay there and to just say, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Like what is the gives you have a point on the horizon that you're oriented towards and know why you're oriented towards it. And at my age, I don't think that money's a good enough reason to orient towards that. Maybe in my 20s and 30s I did, but that really wasn't like at some point that runs out because you can never have enough money. You can never have enough fame, and that builds a cycle that's really grotesque. So understand what is that thing you've talked about it? What's the fulfilling thing I could do, and why is it fulfilling? And looking at you, listening to you, what you talk about with achievement and your relationship to achievement, it's like, what is it about the achievement? Keep going. Like I push you, like, keep going. What is it? Are you looking for accolades, or are you looking for a way to connect? If you're looking for a way to connect, boom, there you go. That's great. We can work with that.
Yeah, it's interesting because it took me a long time. Like like to look at it as values work. And I remember the first time I was like, what is a value? And my mentor at the time was like, it's what's important to you. And I'm like, holy shit, I don't know what's important to me. And so I'm like, cool, people should have values. That seems like something useful to have. So I looked on the internet for a list of values and I started trying to pick values. I'm like, okay, what's important to me? And as I was going through that exercise, I was finding I was picking things that I thought should be important to me, like love. People should value love, right? That seems to be something that's important. And long story short, I've got my little list of values that I've sat with me over time, and some of those are challenge, strength, growth, achievement, and knowing that those things are so important to me, that makes my whole past careers and histories make sense to me now, because I'm like, those values were intertwined in all of them. Some of the times they were driven by other people saying, hey, you should do this, and my challenge was doing that and achieving that. And depending on the person, I was potentially seeking love and connection with them, but that's a whole nother story. But now it's, yeah, knowing that those things still drive me, but what challenges do I want to take on? What achievements do I want to take? And I'm not one to, I don't do this to get accolades. I'm not hoping to be wildly known and famous. I do this because I love it and I love connecting with people. And even launching this podcast was an achievement. And now I just get to connect with awesome people like yourself and learn and get the personal growth through doing this. So yeah, I think it's asking yourself why those things are important to you and making sure that you're okay with whatever it is. There's no good or bad motivations, I don't feel. It's making sure that you're okay with it because it's your life, right?
It's your life. Absolutely. Like there's no grade. I mean, you said achievement, challenge, and something else and growth. And before you even said that,
Strength.
I'm thinking what I think Myth is really on to beyond the achievement part is the growth part of this.
Yeah.
I think those just become expressions of it. I mean,
Yeah.
achievement could be could also be I need the achievement because I'm looking for approval, right? And so then we get into people pleasing. We get
And it
into
used to be
external. There
100%.
you go. Of course. I mean,
Yeah.
you're an athlete. Of course. You get
Yeah.
into, we get validation by getting on the podium. Well, do I? Do I really? Because there's never enough. Of course you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that for your friend who's making that transition is exploring their relationship to achievement. What
Mm,
has it meant? Like, what has it
yeah.
meant? Are you doing this for mom and dad's approval? Are you doing this because
Mm,
you're looking for approval that you'll never ever get? Great. Let's
mm.
find that. And then let's work through that. If you're never going to get that, then how do you approve of yourself? And then someone will say, well, I don't know. I really am not. Great. Then maybe this is a journey of self acceptance.
That's a good journey too.
Well, I don't think it ends.
No, no. You mentioned being able to sit in the discomfort and do the hard things. I think it's really easy if you're driven by growth to be like, cool, I'm going to choose to do the hard thing because I know what's on the other side of them. I'm interested to hear what you would say to someone go, but Brian, why would I choose to do the hard things like that? Like, I'm comfortable. I might not be super happy, but I'm comfortable. Why would I willingly choose to do hard things?
That's a challenge, man. And I admit that that's where, like, in my Myers Briggs judgmentalism comes up, which I try not to, but admittedly, that's where it comes up. And I think, I would say, why are we having this conversation? Why are you here? Not you and I, but to that person, like,
Yeah.
why are we having this conversation? Because I'm
You're here for
assuming
a
that
reason, right?
person has initiated the conversation, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if I'm at, like, the average party and someone says, "Oh, I'm not very happy, but I'm totally comfortable in my happiness," my response is typically, "Have fun with that.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool. Have fun with
Yeah.
that." And
Yeah.
and if at some point you become unhappy enough where you want to have a change, then it's going to be a hard journey, but it will be worth it on the other side.
Mm.
But if you're cool sitting
And
there,
hearing
great.
And hearing you talk about that, I think of people's different motivations. So some people are motivated to move away from pain, and some people are motivated to move towards pleasure. And I think you need a degree of both. So, for example, I find I'm motivated by goals, so towards pleasure and the possibilities of what could be. So, when I get a little bit discomfort, that's not going to motivate me for change. I actually love a little bit of discomfort because it's hard and I like hard things because they challenge me and I grow. It's making sure that I have some positive thing to move towards instead so I don't sit in it. What's your thoughts on that?
Right, because we get used to, as athletes, as achievers, we get used to the friction. We get
Yeah.
used to carrying the weight. This is one of the reasons that I actually am not crazy about that book, Grit, that everyone was all
Oh, yeah.
about 2 years ago. Is that what,
Yeah.
to me, and I could be, it's been a while since I've looked at it, but in some ways, to me, that celebrates oh, I'm in pain. Carry, add more weight, add more weight, add more weight, and just
Mm.
go through it. And at some point, it's like the spiritual weight is too much. It's like, no, 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 no. More doesn't make you better. Just come on, let's move through this with some efficacy and some self acceptance, like taking on more. I think one of those great questions about for you or anyone in the achievement side is like, okay, hold on. What am I, where is this playing out in my relationship to self acceptance? Where is this playing out in my sense of approval? And you just do a quick little test there of saying, where is this? What am I, again, it's like, what am I believing about myself? Am I believing that I'm not going to be good enough? Am I believing that I'll only start to really accept myself when I do get that? Or I think that those are also worthwhile questions to have. I don't think you have to sit in them too long, but it's like, just check my motives. And am I making it, am my motives coming from winning approval from that person that I'm never going to actually get approval from, but it's still playing out in every single relationship or everything I do? Then then we're miles away from self acceptance.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think like also not judging what comes up from that too. I mean, there's perfectly good explanations for why we have the behavior patterns that we do. Some of them we've consciously chosen, some of them we haven't. And I think it's going, okay, now I know potentially why I'm doing this thing. that's okay, deciding if I want to change it, because I also believe we can't shame ourselves into sustainable behavior change. We can shame ourselves to change for a period of time, but it's not sustainable.
No, but we can make decisions that are far more informed and free. If you know you're making a
100%.
decision that's approval seeking and you choose to make that decision still, you've made a
Feel
choice that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I'm way more interested in us making cognizant decisions that are fully informed and free, as opposed to ones that are driven by past patterns that are not that may not be serving our interests. Maybe they are, but maybe they're
Mhm.
not. But they're worth understanding.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing in that as well is almost like remembering you have options. Like, you can choose to think differently, you can choose to have different outcomes. At any point in time, you have options.
I could choose to be miserable from mile 65 to mile 80, or I can choose to say, "Oh wait, you've been here before. Here, you know what to do.
Yeah,
Breathe, pedal, eat. Breathe, pedal, eat." And when the intrusive thoughts come in, breathe, pedal, eat, because
love that.
that thought's going to be different in 5 miles.
Yeah, and then just the differences in outcomes depending on those sorts too. If you're hating those miles, that's definitely gonna be a different outcome to go and breathe, pedal, eat.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
Exactly. I mean, if listen, I've chosen to be here, so
So, might as well
let's
make the most of this.
let's rock and roll, people.
I love that. And so, if someone is in the middle of a transition or considering a transition, let's go with that. What's a really actionable step that they can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to take that first step in their transition?
Ask themselves why 5 times. Why do I want to
Mm,
make this transition? Because I want a better job. Why do I want a better job? Because I'd like to make more money. Why would I like to make more money? Because uh, it's going to help me get these other things accomplished. And why is that important? Because I really want to take care of my family or whatever it is, right? But get down to it. That's a really good one to kind of get down to. Just ask why. And then from there, since that's one thing, but I think you go to the next thing. It's okay, so what's the next easiest actionable step? Not the hardest. What's the
mm,
easiest thing I can do? Let's use the classic example. You work in a gym. I have worked in a gym. What's the reason people go to a gym? They go to a gym because they want to change their body. Great. Great. Put your workout clothes by the bed. What if you haven't ever worked out before? Put your walking shoes by the bed. Get up, put on your walking shoes, and go walk around your house. Make it super simple.
yeah.
Then you're just working on the muscle of putting on the shoes and becoming ready, willing, and able. You may not be able, but
Mm,
you might be getting close. You may not even be willing, but you're becoming willing to become willing.
I love that. And it's understanding why you're looking to do the thing so you can lean into that, and then setting yourself up for success with the actions too. I think, and you've probably seen the same, people make a decision, then they're going, cool, I need to do this one step, and it's really hard. And for whatever reason, they stumble on it and lose that self confidence within themselves. It's like you don't need to do something really big and lavish to start your journey. That first step to start building that confidence, and to your point, those muscles of willingness and being able, that's where the key to transitions lies.
How do you go from having never ridden a bike to learning how to ride 100 miles? You go by getting on whatever bike you have and riding around the block.
Yep.
You figure out all the other stuff along the way, and believe us, there is a lot of stuff along the way. In fact, anyone I hate that phrase. It's like learning. It's like riding a bike. What is that
Oh,
phrase? It's just like riding a bike. It's like, you have no idea.
no idea.
You have no idea how many subroutines go into that operating system.
And I have a lot of scars from riding bikes.
Can you remember? Remember even? Oh, how do I stay? What do I eat and drink? Like how complex people make it to just eat. Eat anything every 15 minutes. What's the most perfect thing to eat? Well, why don't you just eat something?
I think that's gotten life in general too, right? Like in the fitness industry, it's what do I eat? Carbs are bad, sugars are bad. I should be paleo. I'm just like, just eat.
Just eat.
You know what good food looks like. Came from the ground, had a mum, something like that. Like
If it
just
doesn't have
minimally
a wrap,
processed foods. You're
does it have,
okay.
no, then does it
Yeah.
have a wrapper that it had in nature that it was born in? Right.
Then you're
But
awesome. Well,
what's the number one thing I should do? I think another thing that ought to be, you like programs like this and professionals like us is that boy, I am so over optimization and hack culture. I'm so over the idea of how do I hack this? How do I optimize this? It's like there are no hacks, there are no optimizations. It's just using a fancy word for how do I get started? Like just stop looking for the most perfect thing, because the more that we're looking for that perfect thing, the more opportunity we're creating for ourselves to not do the next obvious thing.
yeah, because it comes hard, right? Like I like looking at it going, do the basics brilliantly. You can't beat the fundamentals.
God no. I used to have these. So I was coaching people who were racing in crits in their, and they would hate it. Right? They'd be kind of like cat 3, 4, 5 every off season. I was like, guess what? Go ride through the sandbox. What do you mean I have to go ride through a sandbox? It's like, because I want you to ride in uncomfortable, like on things that you're not used to riding on. Go ride on grass. Here, we're going to do the bottle pickup drill. But that's baby
Yeah.
stuff. It's like, great. Then why did you fall the first 3 times? Because your body's so out of whack from a whole
Well
season
played.
of like, work on the fundamentals. They're super fun. And be
That
playful. Actually, coming back to your transition
mm,
idea, be playful.
mm, have fun.
Get on
Yeah.
the learning curve. Get on the learn. It's fun on the learning curve. Maybe that's what you really love. Maybe what you really
Mm,
love is being on the learning curve.
definitely. Definitely. I do. Um, and it's interesting. It's almost like just hearing you say the word be playful. It's almost like remember transitions are an opportunity to reinvent yourself as whoever you want to be. And so have fun with it. Explore things, learn from your previous experiences.
One of the harder transitions as I think about it was actually dropping my identity as a cycling performance coach
Mm,
and stepping into, like, I had always been doing the mental side of the coaching. Always,
yeah.
always, always. Like, I was working with drummers who were having issues in certain performances, or working with CEOs who were trying to communicate. And it just happened to be the vehicle was physical, right? It might have been in the gym or it might have
Of
been
course.
cycling. And I had been so tied into the whole cycling coach thing as a part of my identity and my identity as a cyclist. And dropping the weight of our own identity of who we believe we are, as which you brought up earlier on, and just going on and just finally saying, yeah, I'm a performance coach and this is what it means today. This is what it means today, and this is how I do it. And
Yeah.
turning off the voice, turning off the judgmental voice of whoever that person is who might be leaning in and saying, you're not really that guy, what are you talking about? And just know, like, you're gonna have to make peace with that voice in your head.
Yeah.
And you can say to that voice, like, thank you. Okay. We've heard you today. Now you sit down in the corner and behave.
Yeah. It's interesting even hearing the word performance coach. Like I've battled with what to call myself in this
Yeah.
space, and I've gone results coach, life and performance coach. I'm like, no, I'm not like that. I'm not like the other ones. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm whatever those words mean to me,
Yeah.
and
I
that's
know.
okay.
Like, it's so hard. It's actually, I've done this for years. I've gone back and forth and got help on it. And what I find, in fact, I just had to do this in my own coaching, right? So here's the deal, people. Don't hire a coach because they've figured it out. Hire a coach because they're on a journey and you want to go somewhere on that journey with them and you like the journey they're taking. Don't
I
hire
love
them
that.
because you think Tony Robbins doesn't have a coach. I guarantee you he's got a coach.
100%. Probably multiple in different areas of life.
don't hire a doctor who doesn't go to a doctor in the same way, right? And I had to do this with
Yeah.
my own coach the other day. It's like, what's your undeniable authority, Ryan? What's your undeniable authority? And just talk about like this, what we've talked about, but say it in 22 and a half seconds, which is great. And then when you do it, it's like, oh yeah, that's what I do. All right, that's how I got here. Great. And you do it for yourself as a coach, as a professional, so that you can say it without ever stuttering, right? Without ever choking on
Yeah.
the absurdity of what it is we're saying.
Yeah. 100%.
But at the same time, it's like, who cares what the other people like? Who cares how it lands? We know, like you've heard it, and I've heard it a million times when it's someone saying it and it isn't landing because there's that pause in their voice. It's like, oh, there's your lack of confidence. You just missed the sprint right there. That's it.
You're still working that out, and it's a good journey to be on. And I know that your story will have inspired a number of the listeners today. And if they're interested in finding you as a coach, where can they find you?
Yes. You can find me at locomotivecoaching.com. There is no E on locomotive. That is a holdover from like past versions of my coaching.
Mhm.
You can find it there. You can find me at Bryan with a Y Yates on LinkedIn. I haven't been doing much writing on there lately, but I typically do more writing there. Um, and if you're curious, I would love your feedback. Actually, I've just put out a little 16, 17 page ebook on resilience exercises out on the
Ooh.
website. So would love everyone's feedback on that. Take a look. Tell me if it's useful, if it's not useful. Um, it's there for you to download. All you got to do is tell me who you are, and you can then download it. And would love that, and love to hear what you have to say about that. Also, just reach out on LinkedIn. Like I said, I mean, I love to hear what you all are dealing with, and what journey you're on, because I learn as much from this with Myth and talking to people on coaching or just having conversations as you may or may not get from a session with me. So if you want to talk more one on one and tell me what's going on, feel free to book a free appointment. And yes, I've actually my last cycling client that I coach, who I said, "You're my last cycling project," was actually in Sydney. So yes, I do work with people in the antipodes.
How good. How good. Oh, that's wonderful. And I'll put all those links below. I'll definitely be checking out that ebook. I'm very inspired to read that one. So thank you so much. And thank you for being a guest on today's show. I've had a wonderful time speaking with you. Definitely learnt a lot and inspired my own journey through the transitions I'm navigating. So thank you so much.
I can't wait to talk about and hear about your transitions offline. But thank you so much for having me on. I don't even know how we got connected, but I'm so ecstatic we did. This has been a super fun, engaging conversation, and I really appreciate the opportunity to hear a little bit about your background.
Thank you for joining me today for another episode of the Actually You Can podcast. I so enjoy having you here, and I hope you've taken away powerful insights and tools that will support you to achieve your high-level results. Now, before you go apply all of this wisdom in your life, I would be so grateful if you are able to leave us a podcast review on the platform that you're listening to, or share this episode with a friend. Your support means that we can help more self-led, high-performing individuals just like you expand what's possible for them. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on today's episode, so please go on and shoot me a note on socials and let me know what you think. You can find me on Instagram at MiffGalloway. Now, go ahead and make those dreams a reality, because actually, you can.